So, Al, you've been speaking with Rory Spence from the Dog Hair Network, maybe organising your guest appearance on his show. But he's been talking to you about his favourite TV show of all time, Futurama. So, how would you move from Futurama to your topic today?
Well, Futurama is a comedy program, and Rory's name is Rory, which is the name of one of my favorite stand-up comics. So I think my topic is going to be stand-up comedy.
I feel that was too easy, but okay, on with the show.
Well, he's got a new guest, time to put him to the test. So hey, what's the topic? We don't know, cause he never does research for this show. His name is Jason, he wants to talk to you about a topic you love or something you do. No two topics are ever the same. That might sound impressive, but they're all pretty lame. A conversation with a conversation with a conversation with.
Hello, you're listening to A Conversation With, the podcast where each week I'm joined by a different guest and we have a conversation on a topic of their choice. And joining me this week from Two in the Think Tank, it's Alasdair Tremblay-Birchall. So, hello, Alasdair.
Yay, hello. Hi, how are you?
Do you know what? I'm breaking my streak because there was a long period of time when I kept saying, "Oh, I'm really tired. Yeah, it's a struggle to do this." And then I had 3 episodes in a row where I was like, "You know what? I feel good. I'm awake. I've had a good day. I'm happy." And because of Australian time zones, once again, I'm quite tired. So that's
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize for that. I don't. If it makes you feel better, I'm also tired, and it's also due to Australian time zones.
Well, that does make me feel better. I'm also interested to see what's going to happen because we've strategically timed this so that your son will be asleep, which means we've also timed it to any moment my son is going to wake up. So
yeah, right. Okay. Hopefully we'll bash this out in a like, just the perfect amount of time, and the universe will provide.
Well, there's always that, isn't there? So let's see.
Yeah.
I'd say obviously you are half of Two in the Think Tank. We were fortunate enough to already have Andy on the show, so your name's come up. We've spoken about you, but we haven't spoken to you, so that's nice. All good things, of course.
Well, thank you very much for both speaking about me and listening to the podcast. And I'm very happy to be on your pod.
Well, you say that now. Let's see if you agree at the end. But
sure.
I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't. Not got anything malicious planned, but you never know.
I mean, let's just see how it goes, because things could really take a turn. But I'm also really open to something horrible happening.
All right. Well,
I think that could be interesting for my life.
You're really the perfect guest at this point, so that's wonderful. So we're going to talk about stand-up comedy. You are yourself. You do stand-up, so that's convenient. When did you start?
I started in 2008. Around November 2008. So I just hit 10 years.
Wow. So still going strong.
Actually, I'm going less strong than I probably feel like I was going about 3 years ago, just because I actually got some paid writing work, and so which means during the day I'm already doing kind of comedy stuff, and then also getting family stuff means I'm not going out and gigging as much, and then also there's just that fire in the belly that's not quite as like burning brightly as it once was. I still, all I care about is stand up, and I really want to do it loads, but I feel like I'm just a bit less in practice, and I don't have as much kind of fresh material, at least of my own stuff at the moment.
Oh dear, this seems like it's taking a dark turn early on, but I'm hoping that perhaps our conversation will reignite that fire. That would be nice.
That's what I'm really hoping for too. I'm doing a lot of podcasts tonight in the attempt of really jump-starting this thing.
Yeah, because I feel it's your other podcast where you're doing sketches. That's it's throwing you off. You need to come up with like one in the think tank. I'm just writing a solo show at this point. That will be.
Yeah. I mean that's genuinely something I have contemplated on multiple occasions, and then I've tried, but it's so weird just spending 20 minutes talking to yourself.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to stay on topic, and it's like, I don't know, it just kind of, it goes all over the place. It's boring, and then you're also sort of trying to be funny, but you're sort of forcing it a lot more. I don't know, it's weird.
Yeah, I think it is. Being funny when you're on your own is a weird thing. It seems very self-serving. Like, you kind of think of being funny that you do it for other people. Like the idea is to make other people laugh or or feel good about something. So when you're doing it just in a room on your own, it's just a really weird sensation, I think.
Yeah, and I get very self-conscious that somebody is outside the door or can hear me through the walls, and so then they know that you're alone in your room, and that you're for some reason talking very quickly or talking just loudly and making just the kind of stuff that I imagine comes out of my mouth. I get very self-conscious about it, and so it stops me from doing it.
Oh, but surely you'd know if someone was outside the door, because you just hear them laughing all the time at the,
of course,
the quality content
that's true.
coming
You're right.
out.
Well, I know, but yeah, look, it's a great place to end that part. Yeah.
Yeah. Come on, let's stay positive. How? Don't do this to me. Let's go back then. What was it that kind of ignited your love for stand-up in the first place?
I was doing an engineering degree, and YouTube had sort of just come out, and I was just spending a lot of my time, instead of like working on my thesis, I was spending just a lot of time searching for and watching endless amounts of stand-up, and I was like, wait a second, these people are just people, right? Like they're not born really good at this. Like you probably do have to just do it and get better at it. And so like, because I think it seems so far away, like the possibility of being able to do it. Like I thought you must just have to be the quickest, fastest, funniest person. And I've never met a person who is, as funny as these people that are on stage, but in my mind, it hadn't occurred to me that it was something that you could learn and you could get better at. And so, and I think after that sort of thinking kind of entered my brain, then I was like, oh, maybe I could start doing this. And it kind of started with that. And then it still probably took another 2-3 years before I actually went off and tried it.
Yeah. Were you kind of scared when you took those first steps? Were you having to, I imagine you finished your engineering degree that you were doing anyway.
Yeah.
So
I bothered finishing it because I thought I may as well have some kind of safety net or backup plan or.
Yeah, and I feel like you can't be a comedian unless you have a degree that you're not using. That's sort of it's
absolutely
kind of half of the course almost to have this path.
There's definitely a lot of like ex-accountants, ex-lawyers, ex-engineers.
Yeah,
but
with Andy, I think we discovered a lot of ex-teachers. That seems to be like another huge one, that they refine their craft by trying to be the funny teacher, and then they and then they go.
The rationale is like that you're like, well, I guess I kind of am performing, and and things like that. But I think it also does sap the soul out of you a little bit.
Yeah, that's one where you have to just quit and go and try and do stand-up. You can't sort of be, I'll do that in the morning and go and do some stand-up in the evening. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to transition from, I'm going to like dip my toe in and try to kind of get into comedy, to then just like, okay, this is what I do now?
Well, it definitely took a long time, because I think, I do remember there was times when I was thinking about it where I'd be sitting in my room and I'd be like, I can't even picture a time where I would have the guts to stand up there and try things. Like even almost, I couldn't even picture having the guts to even write something down and be like certain that this was what I was going to try. So that's why it took kind of like 2-3 years to even get up on stage and try. But then I think once I'd booked a gig in, I was like, okay, well now I have to write something, so I actually have to try. I actually have, because now instead of like now it's kind of like your instincts are kicking in to try to save you from embarrassment. And then I think that my first gig went pretty okay, which tends to be the case I think for a lot of people, because you kind of have this nervous energy. I think I went up on stage with a sheet of paper, and I was kind of just like, I just had a list of things I was going to talk about or jokes I'd written down, and I think it went okay. I think it wasn't until like the second or third gig that I really had quite a bad one. But and then from that point on, I definitely had it in my mind that I was like, okay, it takes 10 years to make a good comedian. Like I'd done a lot of research about like, what to expect, or what comedians I don't know how long it takes for people to get okay and things like that. And so I definitely had like a long-term plan. And it wasn't until, maybe 4 or 5 years in that I started getting some opportunities. And I might have got some offers for writing work and things like that. So it was definitely 4 or 5 years of like hitting it very hard, and spending pretty much my whole focus was that I'd worked as an engineer for like the first year of it, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to quit this job because this job takes too much focus, and then I'll just get a job in a bottle shop. And so I went from like $60,000 a year to making under $300 a week or something like that. So probably under 20,000, just so that I could just be doing stand up and focusing just on that, rather than doing a job that you actually have to be. You have to kind of to be an engineer, you actually do have to care, and you have to put your mind into it. So yeah, and so probably took those 4 or 5 years before I saw any kind of rewards for it, other than getting laughs. Like getting laughs, I think I did see some rewards, at least somewhere within the first year.
Yeah, I think if you did it at that time, maybe it is a good idea just to walk away. I've been doing this for a year and I haven't had a laugh yet. But I hear that it takes 10 years to become a good comedian, so it's fine.
So it should be fine. Yeah, I mean, like I clearly don't have a clue about how to do this at all, or even what I'm aiming for. But I think maybe in the first, I'll give it another 3 years, and if I don't get a laugh, maybe then I'll quit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, good job that didn't happen. We're glad you didn't quit. So I
Sure.
want to jump back to like the YouTube videos you were watching. So were there like particular comedians that you kind of would watch all their stuff, or were you just like dipping in on as many different comedians as kind of possible?
No, definitely. I was definitely dipping in to as many as possible, and so I think at the time a lot of the stuff that was up there was a lot of like, ripped version of some of those Comedy Central presents, which are just those were the people who were offering a lot of stand-up sets to comedians. And so some of the people who kind of first really hooked me were people like Mitch Hedberg was probably like one of the first big ones. And you could just tell straight away, like, within, you watch a lot, but there's so much stand-up that just sounds exactly the same, and are you a bit of a fan of stand-up at all yourself?
Yeah, I watch quite a lot of the different, because I guess in England we have a lot of stand-up kind of front and center, if that makes sense.
There's a lot of like Live at the Apollo, and
Yeah.
I think they even have like some Russell Howard was hosting that Comedy Central one for a bit. I think another guy's hosting it now.
And you had like Michael McIntyre's Comedy Roadshow, and which is very similar to Live at the Apollo, where it was sort of
Sure.
3 or 4 comedians doing quite tight sets, which I feel like though that's something that sort of blurs a little bit the lines of what it really is, because when you get to see people come out and do like very short runs, so it's really just the gold within their set, it's quite different from somebody doing like an hour show or hour and a half. And like, so yeah, there will be those 5 minutes are within that, but then there's also going to be very high highs, but some lower part. It's kind of, I don't know if that makes any sense what I'm trying to say, but it's a bit different, isn't it? And I think it's the same with like the YouTube videos, that unless they're putting up a full show, it's going to be like, oh, here's that really funny bit from his show. So you get to kind of see, oh wow, everybody's at this level, and maybe that's not quite true. They might be
Sure, yeah.
at that level for a little bit of their show. And I guess when you're saying like a lot are very samey, I think that's also where the internet has kind of played a part, because it's probably that you never would have come across this person and this other person because they're living on opposite sides of the world, performing in different clubs, and it's only because now you can kind of just record it on your phone and stick it online that you even come across these sort of two people that maybe they've got a similar style or a similar bit, but that's kind of okay because you're probably never going to see both of them live, so that's fine.
Sure, yeah. But I think also like there's just this kind of like area where a lot, and you could almost say the glut of comedians kind of live, where like, it's a lot of the same topics, and it's a lot of it is tackled in a very similar way, and the people who shine are the people whose voices just, there's just like, there's something weird about the way he talks, or there's something, like they have their own little comedy moves that just kind of look like they're characteristic to them, like lots of people do impressions, for example, and you might see that around, and you'll see a lot of people doing the same impressions, but only really Maria Bamford does impressions of people you've never heard of, which are her family members, and but does them in such a specific way that you just captures that person completely, that communicates to you exactly who they are, but also transforms her, so she becomes completely unrecognizable from herself for a second, and you just don't see other people doing that, and it's these little things like that that make her stand apart from any other comedian there. Whereas like you'll if you watch a lot of Comedy Central Presents, or you watch a lot of any kind of stand-up, you'll see so many comedians, like let's say a lot of the Americans, there was a lot of like I guess it's just hack jokes or whatever like that, but where so many people will open their set and then they'll be like, anyway, so I know what you're thinking, but I'm not gay, and you go, okay, geez, I can't believe you're also doing that same joke that 1,000 other people are doing, like just it's both like this weird insecure, but also I know this will kind of make people laugh because I'm just like a little bit clean cut, and and people will think that at least, anyway, I don't know, that's just my attempt to explain what hack stuff is.
No, I think it works. I get exactly what you mean. I was thinking, like, I get what you mean, that I think I am, because like Netflix now put up so many specials, and some are really good, and some are, as you said, just kind of samey. Like, yeah, okay, that's good. It's interesting. They're good. I haven't really come across any that are terrible. I don't think they would get the special, but you're like, it's good, but it's not anything unique. It's not different. One that was really interesting was James Acaster.
Yeah, his repertoire.
Yeah, and that you have to kind of watch all four, and then you start to see this story like unfold across 4 different shows. Yeah. Which and that was something that, like, you watch the first one and it was funny on its own, and then you start watching the second one and you're like, hold on a second, that's linking back to this other. And then you're watching the third one and your wife comes in and she doesn't get it, and you're like, no, because you gotta, if you go back and watch the first one, you understand. And I just found that such a kind of unique approach that I mean, imagine if you've just gone to one of those shows and not watched the other 3, you're missing a lot, but who cares?
Well,
like,
I wonder whether, like, when he was doing them individually, whether or not he had as many of the linking jokes.
Yeah.
Because surely, like, I think he must have just done that when he was working it up towards recording all 4. Because I know, like, already you can see within his individual shows that the whole thing is like he introduces a bunch of different ideas and then he calls back to them at different times throughout the story, throughout the 1 hour special or whatever. And and he's very good at both doing quite, like, he does like run of the mill observation stuff, but he does it really well, and he also integrates it into a story that he has that which is his his overarching theme. And then this amazing trick where he's now taken all of those stories or those observations and then linked them over 4 different shows, because that 4th one feels like that one mustn't have been as strong a show as the others, or it feels like that one was kind of pieced together with just leftovers. It felt like it felt like there was way more callbacks in that one than there was actual, like, I don't know, dense gear.
Yeah, which again, if you're watching it at home, brilliant. But if you're there, you've got to be wondering what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if it was a gift. Someone gave you a gift. Oh, I got you a ticket to go see that. You like him. You've seen him on Mock of the Week. Here you are. Go and see his live show. Oh, brilliant. How was it? I didn't get anything. I don't know what he was talking about.
Actually, yeah, and I think some of the stuff that's in the fourth one is actually stuff that he has done on Mock the Week. I think maybe because it was probably really old stand-up, and so he would probably had used it on Mock the Week because they probably just have to run through so much. They probably have to have so much gear for Mock the Week every week. So he's like, he says, "Oh, forget. I'll just use my my old bits that I used to do in stand-up that I don't do anymore." And then when he got this Netflix offer, he's like, "Oh, I might try and turn some of that old stuff into another special."
I guess that's again like another a kind of problem that's emerging, is that you're just burning through material now, and because that material is then basically saved and can be viewed anytime by anybody, you're kind of constantly having to come up with more fresh new stuff.
Yeah, totally. And and like we should be. I think stand-ups are all relatively lazy. like there's definitely some people who are, out at gigs every night, and they're trying to do multiple gigs and different things like that, but I still you still don't see people like it doesn't like the UK model of doing like, an Edinburgh show every year or whatever. People in America consider that crazy, the idea of like churning over 1 hour every year. Like that shouldn't be so crazy. I think within that is just there's a lot of downtime and sitting around time that that people aren't, like when we consider a stand-up working really hard, I don't think that is the same thing as a regular person working really hard.
Yeah. I mean, that's why you got out of engineering. That was the...
Exactly. I was like, oh, I think I'd rather try to write less than 1 hour's worth of material every year.
Yeah, I was thinking about Will Anderson, and like he was sort of saying about this last year how, because of what had happened with him getting arrested, like his show had written itself, and it was like the best thing to happen, because it was going, like I've never had it that a show just was written for me and I didn't have to think about what I was going to talk about or anything. I could just do the whole thing on this event. And I obviously didn't fly over to Australia to hear it, so I've got no idea if it was any good, but apparently it was very good. So
yeah, sure. I haven't actually seen that one either, but I do remember when he got arrested, and I remember hearing from people who were like at that gig that he was at after he showed up late after having to get out from being arrested and things like that. And he is one of those guys who definitely does put out an hour every year, and so for him it must have just be such a huge relief. He's like, oh, thank God.
Yeah. So what stunt is he going to do this year to write the next show?
Yeah,
that's the problem. Trapped now.
Well, I think what he I know, I don't know why I'm so knowledgeable of Will Anderson's process, but I think usually at the end when he's finished like touring one show, he takes a few weeks where he's not thinking about anything. Like he tries to just not think about stand-up, and he just tries to live life for like a few weeks, and you got to squeeze in a few weeks of regular living. And then he sits down and just like for days just types randomly like all of his thoughts and how he feels about everything at the moment and things like that. And then out of those few days of just typing wildly nonstop, he gets a sort of the germ of the idea, and then he goes through that document and finds all the bits and pieces, and then he kind of forms an hour show sort of based off of that, like off of this weird body of text.
Yeah, he was saying something like that on a recent episode of TOEFOP. I have a feeling like
yeah, right.
He was talking a little bit about his kind of. I think he was talking about other people, it's like not understanding what he kind of meant by writing, because I think it was about having like watching stuff while writing, so kind of having something on Netflix or something, and you're watching something or listening to something while writing. And
Have you got me back? Hello. Sorry.
back.
It seems like I may have somehow, with my ear, put on flight mode.
Oh, right, okay. I got told connection was poor, so I don't know what that meant.
Yeah,
but-
I
oh,
got told
oh dear.
connection was poor too, but then when I did check, my phone did say that it was on flight mode, and I don't understand at all how that happened,
You have
and I apologize.
very talented ears, clearly.
Yeah, it's
Um,
actually it's my best body part
uh,
in terms of talent,
terms-
talent per square meter.
Is that the one you used to do most of the writing for your for your shows?
Yeah, yeah, I
Just
write
stick a
by
pen.
ear.
Yeah, stick a pen in your ear and go. Right, so if anybody's wondering why there was suddenly some... We've just changed topic. At some point, the connection went dead, and we're just going to pick it up like nothing happened. What were we talking about? Stand-up. Great. So let's move off of Will Anderson at this point and
Sure.
maybe talk more about you. You got anything in the works coming up? Because I only kind of hear you talk about the sketch shows that you guys are doing.
Sure. Yeah.
And I haven't heard you plug too much sort of any stand-up shows. So do you have something in the works or nothing?
I am kind of working towards a stand-up show, but not for like I'm working towards a festival show, but not for this because we have in Australia usually the cycle that we kind of work towards is the festival season kind of starts in February or whatever, or just March, April if you're just working towards comedy festival. Usually like there's people who do a circuit here, which is like they go to Perth, Fringe World, and then they go to Adelaide, and then sometimes people go to New Zealand in between Adelaide and comedy festival, and then they do comedy festival, which is in Melbourne, and then they go to Sydney, and then things like that. It's a kind of a huge circuit, and then people wait until August, and then they go to Edinburgh a lot of the time. But I'm just working towards Melbourne Comedy Festival this year, but I'm doing a show with Andy, a kind of sketch show engineering presentation type thing. So that's the thing called Magma that we're kind of working on, but that's not stand up. So stand up I will probably work towards Melbourne Fringe, which is in September. Then I'm gonna do a solo stand up show. So but yeah, and so I'm getting a bunch of ideas at the moment, but I'm just trying to figure out what I'm doing, and I'm still gigging around a lot, as much as I can, but it's a bit bitsy. I just kind of came out of being employed, and so when I'm employed, it's also a bit tough to also be out all day and then out all night.
Yeah, and you have a family and
Yeah,
other things
exactly.
in life, and we're going back to that squeezing in a few days of living into your time.
Yeah.
It's quite important.
Totally.
But it sounds almost like 10 years later, you're kind of doing the same thing of just having to book in something. And we're like, oh, I've got a deadline now, so a month before I better start probably putting something on paper. I'm hoping
Maybe.
you don't still go up with that piece of paper, because that would be...
I don't, but there are times where I dream of going back with a piece of paper. I think there was something fun about having a piece of paper, and that it kind of felt like a double act where you're like, if something doesn't go good, you can sort of look at the paper and blame the paper. You're like, oh, who writes this? Things like that. I don't know. And so yeah, it was you and the paper. But when it's just you by yourself, I don't know. You just gotta just power through. You go, all right, and just move on to the next thing. But yeah, you are absolutely right that there is an element in which my work ethic and process is like it's often it's the last second, I better try and generate something. So I am always trying to like put in like processes, almost like I'm a corporation or something like that, where I can, if there was more of like a daily routine of just attempting to write things, and then have a build up of bits that are almost finished, and just have them there, and then I can go, oh, I look forward to trialing this syringe piece that I've been working on, and and maybe this dog's tails kind of vignette that I've had on the shelf for the last week or so.
Okay,
But
so
at the
if
moment,
anyone
it's-
is listening to this because they've seen your name and they've come across to be like, oh, I'm a big fan of his, let me hear what he's got to say about comedy, and then they're also going to your show, please look out for the syringe and the dog tail, because I need to know later how that played out.
Yeah, the dog tail vignette.
Yeah.
That's when I imagine I play the role of a dog tail that's being removed. Maybe one of those, it's a big statement about taking dogs' tails off. Possibly, I don't know. Maybe I could also pretend what it's like to be the rubber band that's tight around the tail. I don't know. We'll see. We'll workshop it.
Yeah, I don't know how you're going to do all of that without a piece of paper, but I look forward to seeing it.
You see how necessary the paper seems to be?
At this point, I get it. I understand completely.
You're on your own out there. You need paper.
I was going to ask, because I know you write for TV as well. So has it happened then that you've sort of been halfway through writing something and then just decided, oh, no, this is mine. Like, I'm going to keep this. Or
occasionally, occasionally I've definitely thought that. But then also sometimes I'm like, well, if I like, I think I can safely do it if I think this is too weird and they will definitely not say this, or the show that we work on, Sean McAuliffe's Mad as Hell, he won't do anything that's kind of dirty or anything like that. So if for some reason I have a filthy idea, I can safely go, I'll just keep that, and that's no problem. And then sometimes if something I quite like doesn't get through, like I write it and then it doesn't get through and it doesn't look like there's even any possibility of it getting through, then occasionally I'll just keep it in the back of my mind, and then and then I will actually use it. But he has occasionally surprised us as well, where it's like he's not put something into the approved scripts folder or whatever, and then like 6 weeks later he walks into the writer's room and he's like, wait, who had that joke about Mars? There was a joke, something about Mars and the number of hours on the day, in a day. And I was like, oh, I think that was me. And then he'll find some script from 6 weeks earlier, and then just because he found a place for it,
right?
So so sometimes So a lot of the time, things that I write for TV doesn't make it a stand up, but there are exceptions. Is your answer in a too long didn't read kind of format?
So when you have this reputation as being the dirty comedian, you'll be like, look, it's not my fault. It's just what they wouldn't accept on TV. So
that's right. It's like a John West rejects kind of scenario, but with it's the salmon that was too filthy for John West that makes my comedy set.
Wow. I mean, if it works for you, well done.
Great.
I was wondering if when he comes in, like, who had a joke about, as you say, a joke about Mars 6 weeks ago, does he look at you when he says that because he knows probably this was Al? Like, if it's kind of that style of joke, do you feel like within, because I suppose the point of having like a writer's room is that you've got these different takes on the same kind of on the same thing, or a different point of view on a world event, and different people see it in a different way and they have a certain voice. Does he recognize your voice and go, that is clearly Al? That would
I think he definitely does think it's me, but I think there is some blending of me and Andy in his mind, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Also, because like our initials on the sheet both start with A, and then we've got 3 letters, and I've got ATB and he does AJM. And so I think maybe like, the brain can be tricked by those things. But I think like, I don't think anybody, this was maybe a few years ago when I think Elon Musk had presented his plan for colonizing Mars. And so I decided to try to write a, like a sketch kind of desk piece about that and things like that. And so, and then And so I think in that case, that in that particular scenario, you are right. He did firstly come to me.
I mean, that's got to be a nice feeling though at some point as well. That he knows you. He knows your voice. I mean, he may at times think you and Andy are one person, but
sure. I
mean, I feel probably a lot of people might think that.
Look, I think there's parts. My brain may even consider Andy's brain part of it, just like that's its West Hemisphere.
Yeah, it's sort of just by osmosis you've absorbed his. It's too much time in the tank. That's what it is.
The amount of times that we think of the exact same joke at the same time without even having to tell each other, like we both kind of laugh to ourselves, then look at each other and we go, "Did you just think of that?" And he goes, "Yeah." And then we say it and we go, "Oh my God, that was exactly the same thing. How did we both like, how have we both come to this point where our internal processes are exactly the same? And I do believe it is spending too much time in a tank.
Yeah, I suppose it's convenient if, there's one night that you're supposed to be doing a show and you're just not really feeling up to it. You just quickly give Andy a call. It's like, can you just go on and pretend to be me? And
yeah, he's a life understudy. Yeah,
yeah.
He can. It's same thing if if I'm just too sick to be a dad, he could also just pick right up. He knows my moves. He knows my parenting style.
He's a very experienced dad as well. So,
he has crammed in so much dadding in such a short amount of time. 3 children under 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's really doing it.
Yeah, my son is 5, and now my wife is 20 weeks pregnant. So we're working on the second now. But that's we had a nice 5 years of kind of let's work out how this works. Sort of,
totally.
all right, so
It's
you're
a
not
good,
supposed
nice
to drop
bond.
them. Okay, I understand. Before we get another one. But didn't he have twins initially?
Yeah, he had twins first, and then I think they both sort of just wanted to have, like, I think that anyway, I don't know why I'm talking about their pregnancy, but their pregnancy was quite tough, the first one, and so I think they kind of almost just like had this desire for like a nicer pregnancy. Anyway, but I'm the reason why this is relevant is because I'm planning on doing a stand-up bit about Andy and his wife's pregnancy, and there you go. Brought it back.
Yeah, I'm sure he won't mind. I mean, it'll be convenient for him that day he has to cover for you, because he'll be like, I know this very well.
He'll know it. Absolutely.
But I was going to say, even though you have similar thoughts, listening to you two on a podcast, it's kind of one of those good ones where you both have very different sounding voices.
Yeah,
there's never that moment where you're like, oh, who said that? Because that's one of the issues that you can get with podcasts at times, is sometimes you're like, who's speaking? Although I think on as of recording this, the last episode you put up, you had a guest whose name escapes me now, but he was another writer on Matters House.
Yeah, David M. Green.
Yeah, and he does sound a lot like Andy.
Yeah, right. It's that Australian accent. They all blend in together.
Yeah. Well, when I was listening to that one, I was like, oh, who's speaking here? Okay, so it's and you just have to wait for the content, and then you're like, okay, that's clearly Andy.
Totally, yeah. I and also, like, in our pod, when it's me and Andy, a lot of the time I'm just talking about some weird deformation of the body, and Andy's yelling at me. So that's how you can tell the difference between us. Yeah.
Well, it's funny you should say that. I had a little look at the questions that are coming up later, and there might be one that I saw it and I thought, they don't know who the guest is, but it's almost like they do, because this sounds like a question that was scripted for you.
Great.
So we'll move on to those very shortly. Before that, do you have any questions for me about your topic of stand-up?
Sure. Well, let's go in, like, we haven't talked about any of the, the body of work that is stand-up all that much. Who do you really like in the world of stand-up?
Oh, it sounds like such an easy question.
Mm.
But so someone I haven't seen a lot of recently, but I used to really enjoy, was Ross Noble.
Sure, yeah.
Just had such a kind of bizarre. I just like the kind of bizarre, fantastical sort of element that he brought to it.
Well, actually, Ross, like, because he used to seem like he was just touring endlessly, right?
Yeah.
And he used to tour down here in Australia as well. And because I think he also had a house here, and I think he's married to an Australian woman, and I think that house burnt down. I think it was very sad for him. I think that's why he moved back to the UK. But he's recently been in the front of my mind because of this thing with, like, because I don't feel like I have enough time to be, like, doing all the kind of things that I want to do, including living a life and, writing sketch and writing for TV and writing different things like that. He's very much a live act. And, I know that within his live act, there are definitely set pieces and bits that are written. What he really is offering people is, like, you're going to have a unique experience that's going to be, like, you are going to be integrated into the show, and it's going to be, it's going to be a one-of-a-kind show. And it's made me kind of think, if I, moving forward with doing stand-up, that would be a good thing to try to work towards, trying to get better at just being a live act, because then a lot of the work is just done on stage, and I don't have to do as much work at home when I could be doing other things like, raising my son, and also, or, trying to write other things, like things that might bring in more work, more money or something like that, like trying to write film scripts or other TV stuff and things like that you can't, there's currently no money for. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
Ross
Yeah.
is great.
Yeah, no, I enjoy that. Or maybe I was thinking someone like Al Murray, the pub landlord. I like
Sure, yeah.
I like the kind of, he presents himself as this very kind of foolish, stereotypical kind of, I just view the world this way. But then as he's speaking, you see like behind it this incredible like depth of knowledge and understanding and on so many different topics. And I just like that kind of contrast of what is presented sort of visually to you, but then when you listen, you're like, oh no, this guy knows so much about history, geography, politics, science. Like he's just taken a deep dive on everything, but it all gets
absolutely.
kind of presented in this very like everyman way.
Yeah, and he's like another guy who's unbelievable at crowd work, right? Like he has no fear, and a lot of his bits involve asking a question to the audience, and his answers are based on, like his own bits are based on the answers that he's going to get. Like what's that one about all the international versions of the name John?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
Johann, and Jean.
What's great is then
Anyway.
he'll like move on to another person, and then another one, and then like they'll say something that will call back to the person he spoke to sort of 2 or 3 people ago, and he'll just like snap straight back to that person, know exactly where they are in the audience, exactly kind of how this person's job links to that person's job, and yeah, brilliant. So there's a couple of. I'm glad I actually had some answers. Oh wow.
No, you've done really well.
I panicked for a second.
Well, I'm glad that it wasn't too back of mind. You were able to find it, and I'm really proud of you.
Oh, thanks. I'm just going to cut that little sound clip out. Just put it on
Sure.
repeat.
You could like sort of how you can put these days, you can put a little sound clip into a a MIDI keyboard and just add notes like that, and you could just have like the major scale of just me saying proud, 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 proud.
See, I don't even need to do that now because I've got a new sound clip right there.
But I know, but you could put that sound effect into the keyboard, and then you could play that major scale, but in each key.
Oh wow, this is getting deep.
Yeah, it's getting real crazy.
Okay. Talking of really crazy, let's move on to some questions without context. So this this definitely, I would say, seems to be people's favorite part of the show. So I'm glad we made them wait about 40 minutes.
Would you call these emergency questions?
Emergency questions?
No. I was. There was a part of me that was joking there. I was trying to test to see whether you listened to Richard Herring's Leicester Square podcast, where he doesn't get them in from listeners, but he has written a book of questions that are just dumb questions, but that he just does anytime there's a slight bit of silence in the show. Asking people if what's the biggest nugget they've ever seen or something like that.
Okay, hold on. Let me add that question onto my list right now. Being tested on my own show.
I apologize. That. Look, I know, I was just going, like, I wasn't sure how big a podcast, what the level of podcast nerdship here was.
So I listen to an insane amount of podcasts. The problem is that because the problem is that's going to sound really encouraging as soon as anyone hears this. The thing is, I'm trying my best to. There's like a lot of new podcasts coming out, especially in like the Podmates group that people were like going, I've just started a new podcast. And I've been really trying my best to listen to sort of everybody's, which is like now getting up to like 100 members. So not quite that many podcasts. Some of them are working together, but it's still a huge number.
Much.
Yeah,
it's too much, and the world is almost entirely made of podcasts now. I think it feels like there's so many podcasts that there's the space between atoms are now podcasts, and so you are okay to not have heard podcasts.
Yeah, although I don't know if I am. I feel bad now.
I just
But
want you to know that despite this, I am still proud of you.
Oh, thank you. I did finally see a live podcast, which I remember having to tell people, "Oh, I'm going out tonight. I'm taking my wife out. Where are you going?" We're going to see a podcast. And then after having to explain what a podcast is, and then explain how can you do that and go and see a live one. But I did wait for Do Go On to come to the UK in order to do that. So that was
that's nice.
So that was nice. Got to finally.
Yeah, and that makes it worthwhile because it's just it's one of those things that's probably not going to happen very often.
Well, I mean, I'm still waiting for Two in the Tank to arrive, but yeah.
Well, we'll see. I'm not sure if our numbers are as big as theirs and whether or not it would be as worthwhile.
Well, okay, maybe. I mean, how do I answer that in a positive way? Of course they are.
Look, I think all we need to know is that even if it sounds negative, it's also okay to not be doing as well in terms of listenership as other people, and that I don't feel in any way bad about it.
Okay, well,
yeah,
I'm gonna clip that bit out for you, and I'll send you
Okay,
that in all the scales. So,
Thank you very much.
a few questions. I guess we're gonna start with this one because this is the one I said was very much written for you. So this is sent in by Carlisle, who kindly provides the music for this show, and he asks, would you rather have extra knees and therefore extra flexibly bendy legs, or extra elbows and therefore be really good at doing the wave?
The wave.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, yeah, extra bendy, like it doesn't feel like it would be as that useful with the knees. I mean, I think you probably want more elbows because then you could reach parts of your back and things like that you can't reach, and you could, I think maybe like you could get a tighter headlock.
Yeah.
Because you just got.
My question is, are your arms now longer? Like,
Yeah,
do you get
it is
an extra bit of, like, I don't know if it's still forearm, but do you get like an extra bit of that in between these two elbows so that
it definitely feels like you would have more buildup of muscle there because it kind of now has to be able to hold it straight and things like that. I think you would have to have like a new kind of bicep kind of scenario there. Look, to be honest, my answer is, I don't know if I've ever talked about this on my podcast, but I always think that what I'd really like is a third arm that just comes out of the middle of the back like that and just kind of hangs over your head like a scorpion tail, like that. Like, because I think that's where it would be super useful. Especially if it could hold a tablet or like a phone there, and then you wouldn't, and your arm wouldn't get tired. Because I think I'm, our arms are not built for looking at phones all the time, and it's very much, it's an awkward position. But if it was hanging over your head like that, and it was more of like a, it was kind of it was all in the tendons, they're holding the thing, they're holding the weight, not the muscle. I think that would be beautiful. So, but that wasn't the question. So I'm just gonna say extra elbows.
Yeah. I like that idea of the extra arm. My concern is that with the two arms we have already, and people using phones and tablets like in the street and walking into lampposts and off the end of piers and things like that, having it just hanging down in front of your face, I don't trust people with it. I think you have to maybe earn the extra arm. Like,
I think that seems like a great thing. Instead of like a a Purple Heart or like a Medal of Honor or whatever, you just get given an extra arm, and then that would help people get recruited into the army. Yeah. I think maybe more people would be willing to go into the army if they knew that they could come back with an extra arm.
Yeah, it's kind of the flip of what quite often happens now. So
that's true. You're right.
Moving on to Rory Spence, so from the Doghair Network. So he's written, I think at this point we both know what I'm going to ask. Now, you probably don't, but he has written in for the last couple of guests just to ask why Robbie Williams never broke America. Was Robbie Williams particularly successful in Australia, is my question.
He did pretty good. I do remember sort of when I was finishing high school that his film clip where he strips down to his, to it, like he strips his skin off and then he's down to his bones or whatever. I don't want to rock DJ, that one.
Yeah.
Rock. I think it was called Rock DJ, maybe.
I think there's a good chance that it was.
Or it might have been called I Don't Wanna. I don't know. I'm not sure. But anyway, that definitely did have some traction, and I think he does do stadium gigs here. I think him and Pink are still come back every few years just to steal Australians' money and then leave. So why did he not break the US?
Yeah.
I imagine he probably does okay there anyway, but I guess maybe my main answer is that he feels very similar to, like, you know, the Backstreet Boys and he's essentially the British Justin Timberlake. You know, like he's the guy from a boy band who went solo, who, you know, is women love, you know, and you know, he's considered sexy, but then you know, he's kind of fizzled out since, I don't know, maybe 2010 or something like that. So, you know, they already had their Robbie Williams.
Yeah. So it's a bit like how, you know, instead of just having, I don't know, The Office, they have to have The American Office, or just like, instead of just taking the English show and being like, we'll just watch the English version, they kind of always have to do the American version. And so they're like, well, we could have Robbie Williams, but we'll just do the American version and we'll have Justin Timberlake.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I think,
that sounds like the best answer we've ever had on that question. So, and I mean, last time I asked an American and they didn't even know. So,
well, I mean, he didn't really break big there, so it's hard for them to have a strong opinion on it. You know.
So you had this viewpoint from Australia where you could look at both sides of the argument. Sometimes that's
very
what
much
you need.
I'm very much a man of the world that allows me to see things from multiple perspectives.
Okay, as a man of the world, here's a question for you from Ian from the Hoff Topics podcast. He asks, can a culture take a traditional food dish and change it over time and still have that dish be a valid version of its original inspiration? Or is my Italian friend right in thinking all American food is an abhorrent bastardization that cannot be allowed to continue?
I think that so I mean, look, I like that second person's point of view, but I think the reason why there's, you know, like let's say a spaghetti is considered to have a continuation of self, despite having, you know, completely been bastardized in America or whatever, from what, you know, what the Italians do, where they're like, you know, hey, first you boil six tomatoes, and they've got to be the best tomatoes that anyone's ever seen, and then, you know, and then it's just from that one ingredient that you make the noodle, and then, you know, that kind of thing, where it's very pure. But then the Americans, it's all about, you know, adding all sorts of different flavors and different things that didn't go in there. I think it's just because we've never changed the word spaghetti, right? I think it's just because there's only one word that we're using, and I can see how that really bothers people who, you know, are from the original place, much in the same way that I imagine that people from England don't like that a lot of the things that are now called English, they probably wouldn't consider it English. They frown upon it, they look down upon it, things like that. But yet it is English, and it's unfortunate that the world kept going. If anything, it would have been great for the Italians if, when they made spaghetti, after they tasted it in its purity and beauty and perfection, if everybody had died and nothing could have progressed. You know, that would have been the perfect place for us all to fade away. Yeah. But instead, you know, the Americans changed it. But you know what? I also do quite like, you know, just a thick bolognese.
Yeah. Well, as I told you before we started recording, I did live in Italy for 10 years, and I also I worked like in Venice for a number of years. So I met a lot of Americans in Italy, and it's nothing more enjoyable than watching them get angry because they've ordered something and it's not right.
Yeah, and, that would be really funny.
And just have that, but they are so like genuine in their outrage. There's no irony there at all. They're like, this is wrong. You're making it wrong. This isn't what I mean when I ask for this very typically Italian dish. Like, don't you know what it should be? Oh, beautiful.
Like, what would be an example of one of the dishes? Like an Alfredo or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Or, well, my favorite one that because I see it coming every time, isn't really a mistake of how they've prepared a dish. It's a mistake of translation, because pepperoni in Italian are like bell peppers.
Yeah, right.
So, and they love putting that on pizza. So you will always see pepperoni pizza. And when you look at an Italian menu and you don't understand anything because it's all in Italian, and the only pizza that stands out that you recognize is pepperoni pizza, and I hear them order it, and then I just sit back and wait.
That's wonderful. That's so good, because that, I mean, that is just, it's a perfect, I mean, I'm amazed I haven't even seen that in a movie yet, because that is like a perfect example of a comedy flip, you know, like the word has just changed meaning, or like, you know, like it's like we know pepperoni is an Italian word. It's like one of the only Italian words we know. Maybe it's, I think it's Italian, right? But then the fact that that's not what it means in Italy is magnificent.
Yeah, it's just, and what's great is that the pizza that they intend to have, like the spicy salami pizza, is also very popular. So normally on like a table of 6 or 7 people, someone will have ordered it, and it will arrive, and there will be this big debate about, no, that's my pizza. And they're like, no, this is diavola. Why, you didn't ask for that. You asked for pepperoni. And so it's just one of those things that just it ramps up, because the first pizza comes out and they get kind of, oh, this isn't what I ordered, and then the one comes out that they think is their pizza.
Oh, that's magnificent. It's like it's literally, it's just like, it's, you could just sit there and just watch people fight all night.
You could, and I do, but
wonderful.
Yeah, I complain a lot about my life living there and how I didn't enjoy most of it, but that's one of the highlights of living abroad for so long. Okay, a couple of small questions to finish up then.
Sure.
Dante from Let's Get Contextual, he asks, does it annoy you when there are 2 light switches for one light and thus they're never in the same position?
Yeah, I mean that there's no consistency of up or down, or which way is on or which way is off. Look, that doesn't bother me as much, because I don't care about consistency, and since it comes with the added benefit of a second position from which to turn on and off a light, I would say that I am very happy when there's 2 light switches, and it also gives me the added joy of making some people angry for what I see as a petty reason.
Yeah. Okay. Asked and answered. Well done.
Yeah.
Phil Better from the Phil Better Show asks, what is your favorite podcast?
Like, I think I have a lot of, just, you know how like podcasts come and go from your life, and I'm sure that's this for I think for a person who has a podcast, that feels like the saddest thing, that knowing that people who are absolutely love your podcast now at some point may just, you might just go out of circulation, and that's a sad thing, but it means that we do get to still discover new things. And I think probably the best thing that I feel like I've listened to this year was Caliphate, which was a New York Times podcast, and it was a reporter, their Middle Eastern report, like the reporter on the Middle East, Rukmini Kalimaji, and it's her, and they interview a returning ISIS members, and she's always just trying to find out more about ISIS, but then she also goes into like Iraq, and she goes into Syria, and she goes into, there's like part of the podcast, they're in Mosul as Iraqi forces are pushing ISIS back, and she goes in there as the buildings are vacated by ISIS, and she tries to find documents so she can learn more about how ISIS works, and it's just both informative, it's exciting, and it's, that was probably one of the best listening experiences, probably one of the best media experiences I've had this year.
And absolutely not an answer I was expecting. So
yeah, right.
That's amazing. That's a great answer. It's so good. I feel bad to ask this final, very self-serving question.
No, go for it.
So this comes in from Batman versus the World, which is a new podcast, and they ask, if you could pick anyone from pop culture to go head-to-head with Batman, who would it be?
Sure. I mean, look, it'd be great to see like Batman fight a dog. So I don't know, like maybe, because I guess you can pick somebody who would be really good at beating Batman, and that, where they're equally matched. But then you can also put Batman in a scenario where he's now fighting somebody who he probably shouldn't be fighting. Like, who was that dog who played basketball? You know, what
Like
was
Air
that
Bud?
movie? Air Bud. Yeah, it'd be great to see. So now, for some reason, Batman's fighting Air Bud, right? And Batman all seems to be about, like, good and evil, and whether or not, is he always good, or is he, sometimes evil, or whatever like that. Well, here it's going to be very clear that he's fighting a golden retriever, and he's an evil man. So I think that'd make a very interesting story for Batman. In what scenario would he be in where he would be, feel like Air Bud deserved to be punched? Yeah.
I like it. So this is a new podcast that from. So this is going out on Wednesday. This new podcast will be coming out on Tuesday, the first 2 episodes, and that is myself and Dante that we mentioned before from Let's Get Contextual. And the first 2 episodes are Batman versus Pikachu, and then Batman versus Indiana Jones. So if anybody wants to check that out, in my personal opinion, the Indiana Jones one is almost the same as the Air Bud episode would be, because that's how I feel about Indiana Jones's skill level in fighting Batman. But
sure, yeah, and Indiana Jones is very much the golden retriever of the human world.
He is indeed. So I'm just gonna add Air Bud to our list, and look out for that episode in the near future. That would be excellent. Well, Alasdair, thank you very much for coming on. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. I'm quite a collector at heart, so like I mentioned before, my wife is pregnant, and there was the logical side of my brain that was saying a second boy. That means life is easy for me because I've got one. I know what I'm doing. And then the collector within me is going, but girl completes the set, doesn't it? So
yeah. Oh man, we're gonna try and have a kid next year as well, another one, and I definitely want that. I want the complete set as well, and I'm with you. But I see where you're going with this. You wanted to get both members of the Two in the Think Tank podcast.
I absolutely did. So I'm happy to have completed that set. I've had Matt Stewart, so I just need now to get Jess and Dave on to complete my Do Go On set. But slowly but surely, it's happening.
I got to tell you, Jess Perkins is hard to pin down to get onto a podcast sometimes, because we've been trying to get her on ours for a while, and she's always busy on the days that we record.
So I'm okay. Now I'm scared, because what if she does come on here? You will take that very personally.
No, I won't, because I think in a way you've got the advantage of being so far away that you actually can do it at almost any time. Like whereas we're trying to get her into the studio, which I think it involves her being physically in one place.
There you go. That's what you'll tell yourself. I'm glad to know. Yeah, I feel like this Do Go On collection could take a very long time to complete.
Look, you need a white whale. That white whale might be Dave Warnicky.
Yeah, I mean, he's a small man, so it's strange that he's pictured as a white whale. But
he's a slender whale.
Yeah, a slender whale. We'll take that. But anyway, it was. I'm not talking to them. I'm talking to you. It was great to have you on. Very interesting topic, and some great answers to those questions as well. If anyone has enjoyed listening to your voice, and we've kind of hinted at it throughout, but where can the good people find you and your podcast?
Two in the Think Tank. It's you can find it on all podcast apps, as I'm sure you have, and you can find me at Alasdair TB. It's ALASDAIR TB on Twitter. And, Two in the Think Tank. If you Google it, you'll find all sorts of, we're also on Facebook and Twitter as well at Two in Tank and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you again for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you do want to hear any more from me, now the easiest way to do that is just to go to jasoncroxon.co.uk, and there's links to the different podcasts there. And if you could go and check out the new one, Batman vs. the World. They're very short episodes. It's a bit of fun, but we enjoyed making them. And I'm sure a lot of people that like Pikachu and like Indiana Jones are going to be very angry at us. So just listen for that. Just wait to see the backlash.
Sounds like it's going to be wonderful.
Oh, thank you. There you go. We've got a tagline for the show now as well. So brilliant. So thank you, everyone. And I'd love to tell you the topic for next week, but I don't know what that is. So you have to come back to find out.
I'll talk to him.
You talk to them, yeah. Get them on. All right. So thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
See ya.